Good afternoon, members of the Geological Society of Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Kevin Ramnarine. I've been asked to answer 9 questions by the GSTT, and I'll try to get all this done within 10 minutes. So here goes. So why did the oil price drop to zero or below zero on the 20th of April? Simple reason is that the West Texas Intermediate oil price, which is really a creature of the American oil market, fell to zero, and then it fell below zero. That is negative territory for the first time in history on or around Monday and Tuesday of this week. And the reason for that simply is one, there is a storage issue at Cushing, Oklahoma, where the price of WTI or West Texas Intermediate is determined. And when that signal was sent to traders who trade futures contracts, persons holding futures contracts for May 2020 started to, of course, dump those contracts, because if they didn't get rid of the contract, it meant that they have to take possession of the oil at Cushing, Oklahoma, and there's no place to store the oil here. So it really had to do with the fact that there is this huge oversupply of oil in the United States, because you would remember the US is the world's largest producer of oil, producing approximately 13 million barrels of oil per day. On top of that, the COVID-19 lockdown shutdown has caused the destruction of demand for fuel in the United States. So there is oil being produced for which there is no use, and there is a shortage of storage. And that, in a nutshell, is why prices fell to zero or below zero in April 21st, 2020. Question number 2. What is Brent and what is the West Texas Intermediate, and why is there this big difference between the two? Well, Brent is the reference price that is most reflective of the global oil industry. Brent is the price which is a price coming out of the North Sea, and it is a crude oil, a specific type of crude oil which is light and sweet, and coming from 4 different oil fields in the North Sea, 2 Norwegian and 2 British. West Texas, of course, is the reference price for the United States. It is again a light sweet crude, and it is determined at Cushing. The price is determined at Cushing, Oklahoma, which is a storage facility that represents about 10% of US storage. And the big difference between the two really is the fact that Cushing, Oklahoma is landlocked, and there are logistical issues around getting oil into Cushing and getting oil out of Cushing, because the shale revolution has put so much more oil into the United States that infrastructure has not kept up with the phenomenal increase in oil production in the US. So Cushing, Oklahoma has become a bottleneck, whereas Brent is produced on the sea. It's a seaborne crude, so therefore it's easier to trade. And that is the big difference between Brent and West Texas Intermediate. Question 3. Is Trinidad and Tobago's crude oils based on Brent or West Texas Intermediate? Most of them are sold on the basis of Brent. So is that a good thing? Well, it's a better thing than being sold on the basis of West Texas Intermediate. But Brent prices are still low, and they are below the break-even for most, if not all, oil-producing companies in Trinidad and Tobago. Question number 4. How much of Trinidad and Tobago's revenue comes from oil and versus natural gas? Most of Trinidad and Tobago's energy revenue comes from natural gas. And I would say that it probably is a good rule of thumb would be anywhere between 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, depending on how the prices of natural gas and the prices of oil trend. Question number 5. Has gas price also fallen like oil? If not, why? Gas prices actually went up while West Texas Intermediate prices were collapsing into negative territory. And the reason for that is, one, as oil prices fell into negative territory, companies that produce oil would take decisions to shut in oil fields. Some of them would take a decision to shut in oil fields and cap wells, and as a result you have less associated gas being produced. Associated gas, of course, is natural gas which is produced in association with crude oil. So that means you would have less natural gas in the US oil, US natural gas market, and prices would naturally go up. Secondly, demand destruction has really been for crude oil and liquid fuels. Demand destruction has not been so much for natural gas. There has been some reduction in demand for natural gas, but it hasn't been as dramatic or as significant as oil. Liquid fuels is really where you have the demand destruction taking place. Question number 6. If oil price is zero or below, does this mean that importers of oil will get free oil, or even be paid to take oil? And the answer is, well, if you are around Cushing, Oklahoma, probably the answer is yes. But if you want to get that oil to a foreign country, to import it into a foreign country, you would have to pay money for handling and for shipping and for storage, and that is not going to be zero. Number 7, how much oil storage does Trinidad and Tobago have? I read where Heritage Petroleum said that they have approximately 3.5. They, Heritage, have 3.5. We know that there's a lot of storage too on the East Coast, in the southeastern part of Trinidad, where, of course, BP, and BHP, and EOG, and so on have tank farms. I don't have the numbers for those, but Heritage Petroleum is saying that they have about 3.5 million barrels storage. The question is what condition that those storage tanks would be in, given that there really hasn't been, to my knowledge, much asset integrity and maintenance taking place on those tanks in the last couple of years, given the closure of Petrotrin. So yes, we do have storage, but what is the condition of that storage? Question number 8. Does the oil price today affect oil traded today or at some point in the future? And the answer is that, of course, it affects both. The oil price is one of the most currently, oil is one of the most traded commodities in the world. The fancy word that the economists use to describe the trade of crude oil globally is fungibility. The price of oil today impacts what we call the forward curve. Or the forward curve would be the price of oil for each month going out into the future. So you could actually enter into an agreement right now to buy oil in December at a price that is, but the price in December has a relationship to the price today. If the price today were to go down, the price in December would also trend down generally. And that's the forward curve relationship. Question number 9. What does this mean for the Trinidad budget, which, as we know, was based on $60 a barrel in October, and it was revised in March to $40 a barrel? My attention is more on the natural gas price that the budgets were based on. The October budget was based on $3 per MMBTU, and the March revision was based on $1.80 per MMBTU. With regard to oil prices, it means that we're no longer collecting supplemental petroleum tax. As you all know, under $50 a barrel, SPT does not apply, so that the Ministry of Finance is not collecting SPT. The Minister of Finance said that his deficit, for want of a better word, his shortfall in revenue, not deficit, his shortfall in revenue is negative 7 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. That was an announcement which was made now a month ago. I think it's a much larger shortfall than negative 7, more like negative 12, because one, oil prices have come down even further from the $40, and two, gas prices are not great. The gas price used in Trinidad and Tobago's budget is not the Henry Hub price, as a lot of people might tend to think. It is actually the netback price, or the price at the wellhead in Trinidad and Tobago, so that you would have to take the price that you get for selling LNG all over the world and, of course, bring it back to what you would realize in Trinidad after you subtract regasification costs, transportation costs, liquefaction costs, and transmission in pipeline costs and so on. So that I am concerned that our revenue from natural gas is also in significant decline. We have also seen low prices for ammonia and methanol in recent times. So revenues coming in as corporation tax from point leases would also be impaired. So those are my answers to your questions, and I would say that for the world to get back to some semblance of normalcy. If we will ever get back to what was normal, we may or we may never get back to what we consider to be normal. But for the world to get over this, we need to get a handle on the virus. And getting a handle on the virus really speaks to, I think, three groups of people broadly. The first group is the public, and the public has to exercise the responsibility that is being asked of them, isolate, quarantine, and social distancing. The second group of people are the politicians, the governments around the world. They are the ones who are spending money to keep the world economy going, and they are the ones who are responsible for procuring the resources necessary for the frontline health workers. And the third group of people is probably the most important, and those are the scientists who are working assiduously right now to come up with a vaccine for this virus. And once again, in closing, mankind faces a very dark hour in 2020, and we turn to the scientists in the world, much like we have scientists in the GSTT. So I thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I hope I answered your questions in a very clear way. Good